For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a crisp September morning in 1992, three close friends, Quinn Nelson, Victor Lopez, and Xavier Young, set out from their homes in Calgary for what should have been a routine photography expedition in Jasper National Park. Despite their extensive wilderness experience and meticulous planning, they never returned. Their abandoned truck at the Skyline Trail parking lot marked the beginning of one of the Canadian Rockies' most baffling mysteries. Despite the largest search operation in the park's history, involving helicopters, tracking dogs, and hundreds of volunteers, the three men seem to have vanished into the vast wilderness. For 25 years, their families lived with devastating uncertainty, clinging to fading hope. Then, in 2017, a Parks Canada ranger made a discovery that would shatter the silence of the mountains. A torn backpack containing evidence that would reveal the dark truth behind their disappearance. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Quinn, Victor, and Xavier in the shadows of the Canadian Rockies. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. In the crisp autumn of 1992, the Canadian Rockies held their usual majestic allure, drawing adventurers from across the continent to explore their rugged terrain. Among these explorers were three friends from Calgary, whose passion for the outdoors would lead them into a mystery that would haunt Jasper National Park for a quarter century. Quinn Nelson, a 26-year-old outdoor gear tester known for his meticulous reviews and boundless enthusiasm, had planned what should have been a routine week-long expedition. Alongside him were Victor Lopez, 28, a respected wilderness survival instructor whose expertise had saved countless lives, and Xavier Young, 25, a gifted nature photographer whose work had graced several Canadian wildlife magazines. The three men had met 2 years earlier during a winter survival course led by Lopez, forming an immediate bond over their shared love of the backcountry. Their planned route through Jasper's remote sectors was ambitious, but well within their considerable capabilities. They had carefully selected early October for its clear skies and moderate temperatures, perfect conditions for Xavier's photography project, documenting the park's autumn transformation. On October 3rd, the trio departed Calgary in Quinn's blue Ford Ranger, loaded with state-of-the-art camping gear and photography equipment. Security footage from a gas station in Hinton, the last town before Jasper, showed them in high spirits, purchasing additional supplies and checking their maps. Victor could be seen pointing at something on the paper, while Quinn nodded enthusiastically. It would be the last confirmed sighting of the three friends. They arrived at the remote Meadow Creek trailhead shortly after noon, according to the parking permit they displayed on the truck's dashboard. The planned route would take them deep into the backcountry, following a series of increasingly challenging trails that few hikers attempted, especially so late in the season. Their families expected daily check-ins via satellite phone, a precaution Victor always insisted upon. The first call came that evening, with Quinn reporting perfect weather and describing a spectacular sunset camp by a pristine alpine lake. The next day's call was briefer, mentioning they were making good time and had found several promising locations for Xavier's photography. The third day brought only silence. Initially, their families weren't overly concerned. The three were experienced outdoorsmen, and satellite coverage could be spotty in the deeper valleys. But when 3 days passed without communication, alarm bells began to ring. Sarah Nelson, Quinn's sister, contacted park authorities, her voice trembling as she explained the situation to the dispatcher. The discovery of their truck, still parked at the trailhead, launched what would become one of the largest search operations in Jasper's history. The vehicle was exactly as they had left it, locked, with no signs of disturbance. Inside, rangers found their detailed trip itinerary, marking an intended route that would have taken them through some of the park's most isolated regions. The weather had remained unusually favorable that week, ruling out natural disasters or severe conditions as immediate concerns. Their planned route, while challenging, was clearly marked on their maps. All three men had traversed more difficult terrain in worse conditions. They had packed enough supplies for 10 days, despite planning only a 7-day trek. Everything about their preparation spoke of experienced outdoorsmen taking appropriate precautions. Yet as rangers and search teams began combing the vast wilderness, an unsettling reality emerged. There were no signs of the men, no abandoned gear, no distress signals, no traces of camps or fires along their intended path. It was as if the three friends had simply vanished into the thin mountain air, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of dread among those who knew them best. As autumn's golden leaves began to fall, marking the passage of time with cruel indifference, the families of Quinn, Victor, and Xavier faced an impossible reality. Somewhere in the vast expanse of Jasper National Park, three experienced outdoorsmen had encountered something that would silence them forever, beginning a mystery that would take 25 years to unravel. The initial search for Quinn Nelson, Victor Lopez, and Xavier Young began under optimal conditions, a rare blessing in the unpredictable Canadian Rockies. Corporal Lisa Campbell of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived at Meadow Creek Trailhead within hours of the missing persons report, her experienced eyes immediately drawn to the precision with which the three men had prepared for their journey. The truck yielded its first clues methodically. Every piece of equipment left behind had been deliberately stored, suggesting no hasty departures or signs of distress when they set out. Their emergency GPS beacon remained in its storage compartment, a detail that troubled Campbell deeply. Victor Lopez, known for his safety-first approach, would never have left such crucial equipment behind. As dawn broke the following day, 6 search teams spread out along the planned route, accompanied by tracking dogs and equipped with thermal imaging devices. The initial focus centered on the first 2 campsites where the men had successfully checked in. The first site near the Alpine Lake showed clear signs of their presence, a properly extinguished campfire and the distinctive compression marks of their high-end tent. The second site, however, proved more challenging to locate. The weather that October remained unusually cooperative, with clear skies and temperatures hovering around 45 degrees Fahrenheit. This allowed helicopters to maintain consistent aerial sweeps, their pilots methodically scanning the terrain for any sign of colored equipment or emergency signals. The men's families had provided detailed information about their gear: Quinn's distinctive red mountain hardware tent, Xavier's blue Arc'teryx jacket, Victor's orange safety vest, all items that should have stood out against the autumn landscape. Dr. Robert Anderson, the forensic anthropologist called in to consult, noted the peculiarity of finding no trace beyond the first campsite. "In my 20 years of working missing persons cases in the backcountry, I've never seen experienced hikers vanish so completely," he would later recall. "There's always something, a wrapper, a footprint, a broken branch." The absence of evidence became evidence itself. The search teams discovered several unofficial trails branching off from the main route, each carefully documented and explored. These paths, while not on official maps, were known to local hunters and seasoned hikers. Campbell ordered each one investigated, knowing that photographers like Xavier often sought unique vantage points for their work. By the end of the first week, the search had expanded to cover nearly 50 square kilometers of rugged terrain. Parks Canada brought in additional specialists, including ice climbing experts to check crevasses and technical rescue teams to explore the more challenging areas. The operation had become one of the largest in Jasper's history, involving over 100 personnel and volunteers. Mark Thompson, then a junior member of the Parks Canada Investigation Unit, focused on analyzing the men's last known communications. The satellite phone calls had pinged off towers in a pattern consistent with their planned route, but the final transmission ended abruptly mid-sentence. Initially dismissed as typical satellite interference, this detail would later prove crucial to understanding the timeline of events. As October drew to a close, winter's approach forced a scaling back of ground operations. The families, who had maintained a constant presence at the command center, watched helplessly as snow began to dust the higher elevations. Campbell's daily briefings became increasingly difficult, as she had to acknowledge that despite the extensive resources deployed, they had found nothing to indicate what had happened to the three friends. The investigation shifted focus to analyzing possible scenarios. Natural causes seemed unlikely given the weather conditions and the men's experience level. Animal attacks were considered but dismissed due to the lack of evidence and the improbability of all three men being overcome simultaneously. The possibility of foul play, initially considered remote given the location, remained on the list of possibilities, though without any supporting evidence. By the time the active search was suspended in late November, the operation had generated hundreds of pages of reports, dozens of aerial photographs, and a growing file of unanswered questions. The last entry in Campbell's field notebook reflected the frustration felt by all involved. 3 expert outdoorsmen don't just vanish. Something or someone made them disappear. Until we find out what or who, this case will never be truly closed. As winter settled over the Rockies, the disappearance of Quinn Nelson, Victor Lopez, and Xavier Young gradually transformed from an active investigation into one of Jasper National Park's most perplexing cold cases. The bright yellow incident command tent that had become a fixture at Meadow Creek Trailhead was dismantled, its absence a stark reminder of hopes fading with the autumn leaves. The Calgary outdoor community, tight-knit and resilient, struggled to accept the lack of closure. These were men who had taught wilderness safety courses, written gear reviews, and guided countless others safely through the backcountry. Their disappearance challenged everything the community thought they knew about wilderness preparedness. Sarah Nelson, Quinn's sister, refused to let her brother's memory fade into statistics. Every October, she organized memorial hikes along the first section of the trail where the men had vanished. What began as a small gathering of family members grew into an annual event drawing hundreds of participants, their headlamps creating a river of light flowing through the darkness. The families maintained a dedicated website, updating it regularly with any fragments of information that emerged. Victor's mother, Alina Lopez, spent countless hours scanning satellite imagery of the area, convinced that somewhere in the vast wilderness, evidence remained undiscovered. Xavier's photographs, published in outdoor magazines before his disappearance, took on an almost mythical quality among local photographers who continued his work, documenting the park's remote regions. Park rangers incorporated the case into their routine patrols, carrying photographs of the men's equipment and noting any unusual findings in the backcountry. The distinctive red tent, high-end cameras, and survival gear remained on their checklist year after year, though expectations of discovery diminished with each passing season. The investigation file grew thick with potential leads that led nowhere. A hunter reported finding an unusual campsite in 1994, but subsequent searches revealed only old hunting blinds. Hikers occasionally reported strange sounds or unexplained equipment in the backcountry, each report meticulously investigated and ultimately dismissed. Corporal Lisa Campbell, though reassigned to other duties, kept returning to the case during quiet moments. She maintained contact with the families, sharing their frustration as each new theory or possible sighting evaporated under scrutiny. The case haunted her, not just for its mysterious nature, but for the profound impact it had on wilderness safety protocols throughout the park system. As years passed, the mystery began attracting attention from true crime enthusiasts and amateur investigators. Online forums buzzed with theories ranging from plausible to outlandish. Some suggested the men had stumbled upon something they weren't meant to see, while others proposed they had staged their own disappearance. The families endured these speculations with quiet dignity, always steering conversation back to the facts and the hope for resolution. The case periodically resurfaced in local media, particularly around anniversaries or when similar incidents occurred in other parks. Journalists would retrace the known facts, interview family members, and inevitably conclude their pieces with the same unanswered questions that had plagued investigators from the start. By 2015, the original investigation team had largely retired or moved on. New rangers learned about the case during their training, the story serving as both a cautionary tale and a reminder that even the most experienced outdoorsmen could vanish without trace. The mystery became part of park lore, whispered around campfires and discussed in hushed tones at ranger stations. Dr. Robert Anderson, the forensic anthropologist who had consulted on the initial search, continued to use the case in his lectures, presenting it as an example of how the absence of evidence could be as significant as its presence. The complete lack of typical survival behavior indicators, no emergency shelters, no signal fires, no signs of foraging, suggested something had happened quickly enough to prevent 3 experienced men from taking any survival actions. The families never gave up hope, but they learned to live with uncertainty. They established a scholarship fund in the men's names, supporting wilderness education and safety programs. Each year, 3 students received funding to pursue careers in outdoor leadership, carrying forward the passions that had defined Quinn, Victor, and Xavier's lives. For 25 years, the case remained a troubling void in the park's history, a reminder that even in an age of satellite technology and GPS tracking, the wilderness could still hold secrets. Then, in the spring of 2017, a routine patrol by park rangers would uncover a weather-worn backpack that would shatter the silence of a quarter century, finally beginning to answer the questions that had haunted so many for so long. The spring thaw of 2017 brought more than renewal to Jasper National Park. During a routine patrol of the backcountry, Senior Park Ranger James Mitchell spotted something unusual protruding from a melting snowbank, a fragment of weathered fabric that would finally break open a 25-year-old mystery. What Mitchell initially dismissed as abandoned trash revealed itself to be a severely damaged backpack, its once bright fabric faded to a ghost of its original color. The pack had been torn apart with savage force, its contents scattered and degraded by years of exposure to the elements. But inside a waterproof compartment, protected from decades of harsh Canadian winters, lay a camera that would change everything. The discovery site lay nearly 3 kilometers off the missing hikers' planned route, in a steep-sided valley rarely visited by park visitors. The location itself raised immediate questions experienced hikers like Quinn, Victor, and Xavier would have had no reason to deviate so far from their documented path unless something, or someone, had forced them to do so. Specialist Mark Thompson, now a senior investigator with Parks Canada, arrived at the scene within hours. The backpack serial number matched one purchased by Quinn Nelson in the summer of 1992. The damage pattern told its own disturbing story. This was no animal attack or natural deterioration. The fabric had been deliberately slashed, with several cuts showing the distinctive marks of a serrated blade. But it was Quinn's camera, a high-end Nikon carefully sealed in its protective case, that held the key to unraveling the mystery. Despite years of exposure, the camera's memory card remained intact. When forensic technicians carefully extracted and analyzed its contents, the final moments of 3 friends' lives began to emerge with chilling clarity. The last series of photographs started innocuously enough spectacular sunset shots of the mountains, Victor demonstrating rope techniques, Xavier adjusting his tripod by a pristine stream. Then the images took a darker turn. The final 3 photos, taken in rapid succession, showed a man approaching their campsite, rifle raised, his face clearly visible in the morning light. The terror in Victor's expression in the last frame spoke volumes about what happened next. Dr. Robert Anderson, called in to examine the site, noted signs of long-term soil disturbance that had been masked by years of natural regrowth. The vegetation patterns were subtly wrong, he would later testify. The kind of irregularity you see when the ground has been significantly disturbed and then left to recover naturally. The discovery galvanized the investigation. Within days, the remote valley was transformed into a hive of activity. Forensic teams carefully gridded the area, documenting every scrap of evidence that had survived the decades. The torn backpack yielded additional clues, traces of soil chemistry that didn't match the surrounding terrain, microscopic fibers that would later prove crucial to the prosecution's case. For the families, the discovery brought a complex mix of emotions. Sarah Nelson collapsed when shown her brother's recovered camera, the last images he captured finally telling the story of that fatal morning. Elena Lopez, who had never stopped searching for answers, found bitter vindication in her long-held belief that her son and his friends had met with foul play. The photographs revealed more than just the face of a killer. They showed the devastating randomness of the encounter. Three friends in the wrong place at the wrong time had stumbled upon something that would cost them their lives. The images showed no signs of previous tension or awareness of danger. One moment they were setting up camp. The next, they were facing a rifle wielded by a stranger whose secret they had unknowingly discovered. The camera's discovery transformed a decades-old mystery into an active homicide investigation. The clear images of the armed man would soon lead investigators to Raymond Clark, a name that meant nothing to the families, but would come to dominate their thoughts in the months ahead. The peaceful valley where the backpack was found would yield more secrets as the investigation progressed, each discovery building toward a resolution that had seemed impossible for 25 years. As word of the breakthrough spread through the Park Service, veterans of the original search returned to join the new investigation. Corporal Lisa Campbell, now nearing retirement, flew in from Ottawa to walk the scene where answers had laid hidden for so long. Standing where Quinn's camera had captured its final images, she could finally begin to piece together the tragic events that had haunted her career. The discovery of Quinn's camera transformed the methodical pace of cold case investigation into an urgent manhunt. Within hours of identifying the armed man in the photographs, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police assembled a dedicated task force, converting a small conference room in Jasper's Park headquarters into a command center plastered with timelines and satellite imagery. Corporal Lisa Campbell, drawn out of semi-retirement by the breakthrough, brought decades of institutional knowledge to the investigation. Her original case files, meticulously maintained over 25 years, provided crucial context as investigators began mapping the location of the recovered backpack against historical satellite imagery of the area. The valley where the backpack was found held its own secrets. Aerial surveys from the early 1990s revealed subtle changes in vegetation patterns that experts now recognized as characteristic of illegal marijuana cultivation. The remote location, difficult access, and nearby water source made it an ideal site for a hidden growing operation. "We were looking at the wrong areas all along," Campbell admitted, studying the topographical maps. "The original search focused on their planned route. We never considered they might have been forced off the trail." The revelation led to a comprehensive review of satellite imagery spanning the past 3 decades, revealing a pattern of disturbed soil and altered vegetation that spoke of long-term cultivation. Database searches for known marijuana operations in the Canadian Rockies during the early 1990s produced a list of suspects, but one name stood out. Raymond Clark had been arrested in 1995 for a similar operation in British Columbia, though he served only 18 months of a 5-year sentence. His method of concealing grow sites in remote parkland matched the evidence emerging from the Jasper site. The investigation team painstakingly reconstructed Clark's movements during the fall of 1992. Credit card receipts placed him in Hinton just days before the hikers disappeared. Vehicle registration records showed he owned a truck matching tire tracks photographed by Quinn's camera. Each piece of evidence tightened the connectio in between Clark and the growing operation that the three friends had accidentally discovered. Park rangers with decades of experience were stunned to learn of the sophistication of Clark's operation. Hidden irrigation systems, carefully concealed supply caches, and expertly disguised access trails spoke of someone intimately familiar with backcountry operations. The site's location, just far enough off established trails to avoid casual discovery, but close enough to access roads for transportation, showed careful planning. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Robert Anderson led the detailed examination of the valley floor. Ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies consistent with disturbed soil, while chemical analysis of soil samples showed traces of fertilizers commonly used in marijuana cultivation. The evidence painted a picture of a large-scale operation that had operated undetected for years before the fatal encounter with Quinn, Victor, and Xavier. The investigation took on new urgency when background checks revealed Clark was still alive, living quietly on a small farm in Saskatchewan. Surveillance photos showed a man aged by time, but still matching the figure captured in Quinn's final photographs. The rifle he was photographed carrying that day was traced through registration records to a weapon he had reported stolen in 1993, shortly after the disappearances. As investigators pieced together Clark's movements over the decades, a pattern of calculated deception emerged. He had maintained his marijuana operation for years after the murders, only abandoning the site when increased park surveillance made it too risky. The profits from his illegal enterprise had funded a comfortable retirement, while three families spent decades wondering about the fate of their loved ones. The case that had haunted Jasper National Park for 25 years was finally approaching resolution. The random discovery of a torn backpack had unveiled not just a triple homicide, but one of the largest illegal growing operations ever discovered in Canada's national parks. For the families of Quinn, Victor, and Xavier, each new detail brought them closer to understanding the tragic circumstances that had stolen their loved ones on what should have been a routine photography expedition. The breakthrough in the 25-year-old case came with startling swiftness once forensic technicians enhanced Quinn Nelson's recovered photographs. Modern digital enhancement techniques revealed details that would have been impossible to discern in 1992, bringing Raymond Clark's features into sharp focus. The man who had approached their campsite that autumn morning was no longer a shadowy figure, but a clear suspect with identifiable characteristics. The enhanced images showed distinctive scarring on Clark's left cheek and a unique pattern in his beard, details that perfectly matched his 1995 arrest photos from British Columbia. More telling was his stance, the practiced posture of someone familiar with firearms and comfortable with intimidation. The sequence of photos captured his methodical approach to the campsite, suggesting this was not his first confrontation with unwanted visitors. Dr. Robert Anderson's analysis of the valley floor proved equally revealing. Using advanced ground-penetrating radar, his team identified three distinct areas where the soil composition differed markedly from the surrounding terrain. The disturbed earth, approximately 6 feet long each, laid in a row along the valley's eastern edge. The locations matched perfectly with the growth patterns that had initially caught Anderson's attention. The investigation team worked meticulously to build a comprehensive timeline of Clark's activities. Bank records showed regular cash deposits between 1990 and 1994, always just under the reporting threshold. His purchases during this period included industrial irrigation equipment, specialized growing supplies, and the same model of hunting rifle captured in Quinn's photographs. When investigators finally pieced together Clark's movements, they discovered he had maintained a regular pattern of visiting the park every 3 weeks during growing seasons. He would enter through rarely used access roads, timing his visits to avoid ranger patrols. The operation had been masterfully concealed, using natural features to hide the irrigation systems and carefully managing the canopy to prevent aerial detection. The case accelerated forensic analysis of soil samples from the disturbed areas revealed traces of human DNA. Despite decades of exposure to the elements, enough genetic material remained to confirm the presence of 3 distinct individuals. When compared against family reference samples, the DNA matched Quinn, Victor, and Xavier. Clark's careful facade began to crumble under surveillance. Investigators observed him making late-night phone calls from pay phones, withdrawing large sums from long-dormant bank accounts, and inquiring about international travel. His actions suggested he knew the investigation was closing in, though he maintained his routine of tending his small Saskatchewan farm. The most damning evidence came from Clark's own meticulous record-keeping. Hidden in his barn, investigators discovered weather-worn notebooks documenting years of marijuana cultivation, including entries from October 1992. The notes abruptly stopped for 2 weeks following the date of the hiker's disappearance, resuming with detailed instructions for relocating growing operations. As the evidence mounted, investigators uncovered connections between Clark and several other unsolved disappearances in national parks across Western Canada. Though none could be definitively linked to him, the pattern was clear. He had operated with impunity for years, protected by the vastness of the wilderness and his intimate knowledge of backcountry operations. The final piece fell into place when ballistics experts matched tool marks on the recovered backpack to a serrated hunting knife found in Clark's possession. The blade's unique wear pattern created distinctive cuts that perfectly aligned with the tears in Quinn's pack, confirming what investigators had long suspected: the damage was intentional, meant to destroy evidence of the encounter. With each new discovery, the tragic last moments of Quinn, Victor, and Xavier became clearer. They had been setting up camp when Clark discovered them, too close to his operation for comfort. The photographs suggested they had tried to reason with him, their hands raised in a gesture of peace. But Clark, with millions of dollars in illegal crops at stake, had made a cold calculation that would haunt 3 families for decades. The arrest of Raymond Clark on a cool September morning in 2017 brought no satisfaction to the families who had waited 25 years for justice. As RCMP officers led the 72-year-old man from his Saskatchewan farmhouse, Sarah Nelson watched from her car, studying the weathered face that had haunted her brother's final photographs. Clark's initial defiance crumbled during interrogation. Faced with overwhelming forensic evidence and the crystal-clear images from Quinn's camera, he provided a full confession. His voice, steady and emotionless, detailed how he had encountered the 3 friends setting up camp near his hidden marijuana operation. He described their attempts to leave peacefully, their promises to forget what they had seen. Then he recounted, with chilling detachment, his decision to eliminate all witnesses. The recovery operation lasted 2 weeks. Under Clark's direction, forensic teams located the remains of Quinn, Victor, and Xavier buried along the eastern edge of the valley. Dr. Anderson supervised the excavation, ensuring every fragment of evidence was properly documented. The careful positioning of the bodies revealed Clark's methodical nature. Each victim had been buried 6 feet deep, their equipment scattered to suggest they had simply vanished into the wilderness. Elena Lopez attended every day of Clark's trial, watching as prosecutors methodically presented 25 years of evidence. The courtroom fell silent when Quinn's recovered photographs were displayed, the final images showing Victor's face transforming from confusion to terror as he realized their fate. Xavier's mother left the courtroom during Clark's testimony, unable to bear his mechanical recitation of events. The verdict brought no surprises. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before finding Clark guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. The judge, noting Clark's complete lack of remorse, imposed 3 consecutive life sentences. Clark showed no emotion as the families delivered their impact statements, their words echoing through the hushed courtroom. The case prompted significant changes in park security protocols. Jasper National Park implemented enhanced surveillance systems, focusing on remote areas previously considered too isolated for regular monitoring. Regular aerial surveys now use thermal imaging to detect unauthorized activities, while ground patrols follow sophisticated mapping algorithms designed to identify potential hidden operations. The memorial service held at Meadow Creek Trailhead drew hundreds of mourners from across Canada's outdoor community. 3 maple trees were planted along the trail, their leaves now turning gold each autumn, marking the season when 3 friends set out on their final adventure. A simple bronze plaque bears their names and a message that has become a mantra for park safety. The wilderness holds both beauty and danger. Remember Quinn, Victor, and Xavier. Sarah Nelson established a foundation in her brother's name, providing wilderness safety training to young photographers and hikers. The program emphasizes the importance of satellite communications and emergency protocols, ensuring that Quinn's passion for outdoor adventure creates a lasting legacy of safety awareness. The valley where Clark operated his illegal enterprise has been reclaimed by nature. Native plants have erased all traces of his growing operation, though careful observers can still detect subtle changes in the vegetation patterns. Park rangers now include the site in their training, teaching new officers to recognize signs of illegal activities that might otherwise go unnoticed. For Corporal Lisa Campbell, the resolution brought both closure and regret. The evidence had been there all along: unusual vegetation patterns, unexplained tire tracks, subtle signs of human activity in restricted areas. The case transformed how law enforcement approaches wilderness investigations, emphasizing the importance of considering criminal activity even in the most remote locations. 25 years of questions finally had answers, though not the ones the families had hoped for. 3 lives had been taken not by the wilderness they loved, but by human greed. The Canadian Rockies, vast and magnificent, had kept this secret for a quarter century, until a torn backpack and a preserved camera revealed the truth that had laid hidden beneath the snow and silence of Jasper National Park.